All right, fellas, we are back again. But hey, before we get into week 6 of this college football season, hey, I want to get down to it because you got enough on film now and enough weeks have passed. Start kind of trying to weed out who are the top teams or the true top teams in the country. I think last year you really could see from week 1 till the championship, Georgia was far and out in front of everybody else, just how they treated their games week in and week out and those final scores. But this season, you don't really see that distance between a one clear-cut team that's far ahead of everybody else. And a lot of people, even the teams that we thought were going to do that, like Georgia has struggled in first halves of their games. Ohio State looked iffy early in the season. Michigan hadn't really played anybody really to kind of get a feel for who they are. A lot of people had a lot to say about FSU. And they looked it for the beginning first, like couple weeks of the season. And then after these last couple weeks, they've kind of struggled in some games. You had the Boston College game where they looked a little iffy at Boston College, and at Clemson, they looked a little iffy also. And it's interesting to try to figure it out now. Who are the real top 4 teams? So let me get feed off of y'all. Sean, who do you got as your top 4 right now in the country?
All right, right now I'm going to go from 4 down to 1. My number 4 team is Florida State. They had a neutral site win against then number 5 LSU early in the season, first game actually. They won a close one against Clemson, to kind of take back the ACC. I think they got enough momentum and they got enough schedule that the schedule really works out for them until they get to Miami to continue to win. The number 33 in passing yards. Now, they are 81st in rushing yards. They're struggling a little bit there. The number 11 points for, 49 points against. Stat-wise, they're not great, but they're doing everything they need to do to continue to win football games. And they also have a Heisman candidate in Jordan Travis at quarterback leading the team. So, the ingredients are there. Whether it continues throughout the course of the season, who knows? My number 3, I'm going to go to Ohio State. I'm giving them a lot of credit for the road win at night at Notre Dame. Even though I do believe Notre Dame's coaching staff did not do them any favors. They could have at least stopped them from scoring on the goal line if they had 11 players on the field. Come on now. But nonetheless, they got a new quarterback, Kyle McCord. I think if he continues to grow and learn and does not turn the ball over, Ohio State is going to be there at the end. My number 2 team is Michigan. In my opinion, Michigan has done nothing but destroy teams. Even though they hadn't played anybody yet, they're doing everything that their ranking says they should be doing. Michigan and Ohio State are going to clash at the end of the season, so that's going to be a doozy. One of those teams are going to be out when it's all said and done. My number 1 team is the Texas Longhorns. To me, they got the most impressive resume with their road win against number 3 Alabama. They just destroyed number 24 Kansas. Now, Kansas was playing without their starting quarterback, but they still handled business. They have a very, very good returning veteran quarterback in Quinn Ewers. The defense is they're flying all over the field. In my opinion, Texas is playing the best football of anybody else in the country. And just for those of y'all that are just wondering where the hell Georgia is, I got him at number 5.
Got you. I'm going to go ahead and take on the next one. Sean, I really thought my top 4 was going to be so hard to do and so hard to predict, but we got the same top 4, literally right in the same exact row, because I think the honorable mention has to be Georgia, because I'm going all the way down. Not going to go too many deep in this because you just said so much about my same points, but I think at number 5, I would have Georgia. My only issue why they're not top 4, because you haven't found your true identity in what this year's team is going to be. Look at the past 2 years, of course y'all number 1. But this year, right now, y'all struggled, and I think that y'all have shown, especially last weekend against Auburn, that, hey, we're finding those things, but we're not completely there yet. I think Georgia's big test is going to be tomorrow, Saturday, going against Kentucky. It's at home, so it's in favor of them, but that's my 5th team if I got to go there. Florida State would definitely be 4 just because I think they have shown that they can get the job done in big games. They've got 2 big games this year. That LSU game was huge, and I think they dominated most of that game. Clemson game, to me, was a huge game because you're going into Death Valley. And you still pretty much dominated most of that game. They struggled out the gate early and kind of finished the game on a weird note. But I think Florida State has shown that they can compete with the top teams in the country this year. Number 3, Ohio State is a weird one to me as well. I like them because, like you said, that win against Notre Dame was, to me, a big win. But I want to know if Notre Dame would have had all their ducks in a row in that late game, would that still have came in the same outcome? I think it would have been Ohio State winning that game, but they're my number 3 team. Defensive-wise for Ohio State is something that I think is going to be tested as we go against these big juggernaut teams in the Big Ten coming down the road in the next couple of weeks. Number 2, Michigan. This one right here is really, really interesting to me because I look at Michigan's schedule and it's really nothing that impresses me. Even I know they have not played anybody, but even going forward, I think they're going to have some games that's going to get tested, but they still not really talking about a huge test until we're talking about Penn State in November 11th. So that's my biggest thing about Michigan is, can y'all keep this high note going into that game and still through that game? Number 1 team in the country, I have to say Texas. For a lot of the same points you said, Sean, so I'm not going to go too much in depth, but to me, a couple quick points. Quinn Ewers, locked in first-round quarterback. I like him right there. Outside receivers are dominant and can get down the field. Defense has been shown that they can prove up and show up in big-time moments. And the biggest point about Texas is going to be their head coach. I think he has got over the hump, beating Bama on his confidence level as, hey, I can be a head coach. Now, tomorrow in the Red River Rivalry, that's going to be the biggest game of the year for Sark. And I think he's going to be a type of guy that can blow Oklahoma out the water. I want y'all to hear that again. They can blow Oklahoma out the water with this offense that they have because I don't think Oklahoma has seen a team that's going to come as aggressive as Texas. To me, Texas is the number 1 team as of the midseason point, early midseason point, just because they have the best record and the best schedule on paper. That's why I got the number 1. What you think, Van?
I like a lot. I like everything y'all been saying, and I'm not going to dive too deep into it. I'm starting off at 4. I got FSU sitting at 4. And a lot of the same points that y'all made. I like the 2 big wins that they got over LSU on a neutral site and going to Clemson and get that game. I think it's interesting about them is basically just the fact of how that team has looked. They look more stable than they did last year. Going into this year, you stumble a little bit against the Boston College game, but in my opinion, that Boston College game had more so to do with maybe a lot of these younger players in this team kind of looking to how huge of a game the Clemson game was, as that's a team that you hadn't been able to get over in the last couple of years. That's the one team standing in your way of taking over the ACC, and you kind of just peeking around the corner, like knowing, like, all right, hey, that's our turning point to kind of get to the downhill slope of this season. But I got them at 4. 3, I have Georgia. I got Georgia down at 3. For the same fact of I really have not loved what I've seen from Georgia. As big as everybody has made to try to say that this team has been recruited so well for so many years, and you got 5 stars all over the field, and you got your physicality on the line of scrimmage is supposed to be that much better than everybody else. You just haven't seen it. And I don't know if it's a motivation issue. I don't know if it's a coaching issue when it comes to them, but it just takes it. For a team that's supposed to be as good as they are, it takes too much. If you got to get into the locker room and give yourself a good pep talk against some of these teams that they've played, I don't know what's going on with that team, and that's why I can't have it at number 1. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt that you're undefeated. You go ahead and you win those games. Some of them you get them by a large margin in the second half, but I'm not sold on it. At 2, I got Ohio State. I think Ohio State has woken up these last couple of weeks. You're starting to see that offensive explosion from a lot of the guys that you wanted to see from them. Marvin Harrison Jr. Is finally performing good. TreVeyon Henderson is looking good at running back. Kyle McCord, all he has to do is just take the San Francisco 49ers approach that they have with Brock Purdy. Don't try to be the hero. We got playmakers. Get the ball to our guys. They'll go get the job done. Take that approach to it. They'll be fine. They'll have their matchup with Michigan at the end of the season. They got a big one, an interesting one this weekend going up against Maryland, who's also an undefeated team right now. But I think they'll handle this one fairly well and come out with that win. And then number 1, I got Texas. I got Texas at number one. I think they have looked like the most complete team in the country so far throughout this season. You've got your big win against Bama. You know, you beat Kansas without their starting quarterback, but I'll give you that. You still handled that game really well. You win that game 40-14 against another ranked team. You went in there and you handled business and took care of it. I think they are the absolute number one team in the country. And this weekend, I think is going to be a very much showcase of why they should be the number one team in the country. And I think if they go in, like you were saying, Drew, and beat Oklahoma as bad as you were saying they're going to beat them by, they might get moved up to number one. I could see them if Georgia struggles against Kentucky like they have been the last couple of weeks, I can see a shift in that top three and maybe moving Texas up to that number one with that top 12 win over Oklahoma. So it definitely will be interesting. But those are our top four. On the outside, I got Michigan at 5, and I got Oregon sitting right there tied at 5 also. And it's not so much to downplay Michigan. I got Michigan at 5 just because of the fact that we don't know who they are. I know you're holding serve, but I think from watching certain film on Michigan, I've seen other teams play better than they have played so far. Until I see them play against a top team, hey, then they can move, do all of that. But I got them sitting right outside looking in.
Yeah. Got you. My Oklahoma, Texas predictions, I don't think it's going to be a blowout. We're going to get to more of that in our game of the week predictions. So make sure y'all look at that video as well. We're going to have that one linked in here. But my biggest thing about the top 4 is there are so many good teams. Don't take this as, hey, your team isn't good enough to be in the top 4. Because there are a lot of teams that are good enough to be in the top 4. Like, for instance, I think I'm looking at Washington now. Washington's starting to catch my eye. That's another team I will put in there. Oregon's catching my eye. Penn State's catching my eye. And I know a lot of people hate USC's defense as in the Trojans. But to me, with that star caliber quarterback that you have, that's by far the best quarterback in the nation. Y'all are in consideration to be in the top 4. So we're going to get interested as the rest of this season goes along. But top 4 right now at the early midseason point is how we just said. So I think it's going to be very, very interesting in that aspect. Georgia fans are going to get peed off. They're not number one in this video right here. But, hey, you got to prove it on the field.
And listen, do not forget about Alabama, right? I'm not on the bandwagon. I'm a fan, but I'm not on the bandwagon. But look at the schedule. We get past Texas A&M this weekend. Of course, you're going to have Arkansas next. It's not going to be that big of a problem. You mess around and get past Tennessee, LSU, Kentucky, even with that one loss, regardless of what's going on in front of them, they might make a jump if they run this gauntlet and end up being undefeated through the Kentucky game. So just everybody pump the brakes. They may not be out of this right yet.
I agree with that 100%. I think Bama is in a prime time position to just coast their way to that final. But I think they got a couple games that are going to be huge to them getting to the SEC championship. I don't think Bama can get in the top 4 without beating Georgia. That's not going to happen. So I think overall with that aspect, I do have them kind of outside of those teams that we kind of mentioned as honorable mentions. But Bama, to me, is a top 10 team. They are a top 10 team, mainly not because of offense, but because that defense has shown that they're a top 5 defense in this country right now. And I think they're really, really just getting started.
Yeah. And they're playing a top 5 schedule. So, it's going to be interesting.